What's up, everyone? It's been well over a year since the last time I posted a video. I am sorry. I am so sorry about that. Writing my own stories is not as easy as I thought it would be. I was expecting it to be, the thoughts just flow from my pen onto the paper, and that is not what happened at all. And the gaming thing was never going to work out, honestly. That was just, I game for myself. I don't game for other people. I can't be entertaining while I game. It is just not me. It is not who I am. But now I got something that I can actually do on a consistent basis. And I apologize to anyone wearing headphones. I am just so excited right now because I actually have a purpose. I actually have a goal. I actually have a direction. Something that has been in my childhood. Mythology. Ever since Hercules, back when I was a kid, I was always interested in Greek mythology. And from there, I was interested even further in Egyptian mythology. And then I just kept on going from there. I just love mythology. I just love the tales of gods. And just hearing about how all the gods can do all of these crazy things, and now there's a god of the storms, and god of the ocean, god of the underworld, god of fire, and all these things, and it's like, that's always been just so cool to me. I've always loved how these grand mythical beings could just control the very fabrics of nature, the very elements themselves. These gods just govern these aspects of reality. So, since that's something I actually enjoy, I could actually do something with it. I could actually go somewhere with it. But I didn't realize this until a couple weeks ago when I had an epiphany that I needed to change something in my life. I needed to become more independent. And I went and asked my brother because I figured if anyone knows me, it would be him. And then he said, mythology? And I was like, you beautiful genius, you. And then it just went from there. And I've just been studying up on Norse mythology first and foremost because I like that one a lot, almost as much as I like Greek mythology. But that's also one of the ones I don't know much about. So I figured I would start there. And this episode is the first episode of my new series of World Mythology, where I talk about everything that I learn about mythology, starting with everything that I learned about Norse mythology. First things first. It is incredibly inconsistent. It is one of the most inconsistent lores in the world because there is just so much backstory for why it's so inconsistent. No one can properly agree on what makes it so inconsistent. So, starting from the beginning of what we know about Norse mythology, or the earliest records of Norse mythology, comes from an ancient text called Tacitus's Germania, which dates back to around the 1st century AD and contains the first documented mentioning of Germanic theological beliefs, which honestly, all of Norse mythology was based on various other cultures just intermingling with Scandinavian cultures. There's just so many points where they just absorb other bits of culture and myth from other people into their own. But yes, the first official text is the Germania. The next most recent one, is the Codex Regius, which consists of 29 poems. This text was dated to be about from the year 1270, and it was written by various authors. And soon after that one was discovered, first off, this one was discovered in Iceland. And soon after it was discovered, the third official text was, I'm going to butcher this name, I'm going to try to get it right, the Arnamagnian Codex. And it contained 5 additional poems. They say poems, but they're actually stories. Very similar in nature and literature structure to the previous codex, the Regius Codex. One of those 5 poems was actually a story called Baldur's Drama. That dealt with the death of the god of light, Baldur, which I will be going into depth later about. And because the Regius and the Arnamagnian, because they're so similar in sentence structure and general grammar, the people that discovered it, they decided to combine both of these texts into one volume of 34 poems, and they named it the Elder Edda, or the Poetic Edda. It was an amalgamation of so many poems by various uncredited authors that were more than likely actually separated by hundreds of years from each other. Most of these authors probably never even met each other. They just found each other's work and continued off of it. But they did their best with what they had. But the thing about it was, the Elder Edda, the thing about it is that all the stories, all 34 of those stories, were very, very, very inconsistent. Because of how far apart in dates they were written, so many of these stories actually clash with previous stories. There's points in later stories where characters had died previously in these stories. Then out of nowhere they they just jump right back in as if they had never died in the first place. And there's certain events that happen in later stories that require knowledge of events prior to those events to fully understand, but there is no records of anything preceding these particular events. So it's like watching the second half of a film and not even having access to the first half of the film. There's so many inconsistencies like that no one can make any sense of, because this is the mythology of the Vikings. And anyone that knows about the Vikings knows that they did not really care much for literature to begin with. So it's natural to assume that whatever they told each other, because most of their stories were passed down through word of mouth. There was another text, and that was discovered, written somewhere around 1179 to 1241. It was called the Prose Edda. It was written by Snorri Sturluson. By the time this Sturluson guy started writing, Christianity had started kind of creeping its way into Iceland. And because Christianity was spreading, the culture in that particular area at the time was dying out rapidly. The culture in particular was that of the ancient Skalds. The Skalds, from what we know of them, are religious bards native to Iceland. There wasn't much left to their culture by the time this Mr. Sturluson came along. So he decided to do whatever he could to commit everything he learned about their culture to pen and paper, so some parts of their culture could actually live on. This ended up being called the Prose Edda, which is actually older than the Elder Edda. But once again, even though this time the Prose Edda was composed by one person, once again the stories are still inconsistent because the information he was grabbing was still centuries old and also inconsistent. But no matter what you do, no matter how you splice it, even with the combined number of every single story, it is all one giant jumbled mess. Like, there is no way to properly make sense of it. People have been trying, people think they have it, but there is no official consensus of what is truly proper canon mythos. And the reason for it, the reason why everything's so inconsistent, is actually because of the way Scandinavian area was. That general area of the world is a constant winter wasteland. Although not these days. Back in the day, at least, it was a constant winter wasteland. Their summers were still very, very cold. They would have some sunlight to kind of warm things up, enough for crops to grow for the few short months that they had of summer. And there's points in time where their summers, where the nights are actually just a perpetual sunset because of how far north they are up there. But at night, in the winter months, actually just the winter months in general, there were several months straight where they get no sunlight at all. It gets so ridiculously cold where they have to do whatever they can to survive. That's how the Vikings were. That's how all people in that particular region of the world were. They had to do whatever they could to survive. And so because of that, because of their constant survival, they didn't have time, they didn't have the luxury to commit all their stories to paper. Like, they wanted to, I'm assuming, but they really did not have the opportunity. And because of how terrible it was to live there, that actually impacted their mythology too. So in their mythology, in order to reflect their world, in order to reflect the way it is in real life, the gods of their religion were all mortal. They were still ridiculously epic, but they were also mortal. And they embraced their mortality. They did not shy away from death. They didn't rush to their deaths, but they embraced their deaths. They knew it was going to happen. They knew it was inevitable. They didn't really seem to have a particular issue with death because it was just that common. Yeah, because of the way that everyone just was so pretty much just okay with death. Actually, no, some of the Vikings actually did rush headlong into battle because they wanted to die. Because in ancient Viking traditions, because of how bleak and terrible everything was, I cannot stress enough how tough they had it back then. Because of how bad it was, they believed that the only proper way to live was to die a glorious death, like trying to accomplish something. Because it was so tough to live there, they believed that the only way to live and to die was fighting. So if they didn't die in a glorious battle against raiders, invaders from other countries and other tribes, each other, against a pack of wolves or a bear, or going out into the woods to fight nature itself, if they weren't doing something heroic and epic when they died, then they died a pitiful death. Their ultimate goal was to die in battle, so that way they can go join the gods in Valhalla. and they wanted to join the gods in Valhalla. Because in Valhalla, what you do is you spend the rest of your dead days eating and drinking with the gods, and also fighting when you're not eating or drinking. Either you're stuffing your face, or you're fighting each other, and whatever mythical monsters they feel like fighting. The way everything was over there, on top of everything being hellish and based around death and combat, because of how their society was and how nature was over there, they believed very, very, very strongly in duality, where everything is one way or the other. There is no in between. And they believed everything was this way. Everything in reality was either good or evil. Light was good, dark was evil, warmth was good, cold was evil. That's why the frost giants are considered the most violent and vicious monsters in Norse mythology, because they were constantly fighting the cold just to stay alive, so they viewed the cold as evil. But because everything was constantly about fighting for survival and fighting to the death, anyone who did not die in glorious battle, anyone who lived a long age especially, they were considered cowards and outcasts and had no place in Valhalla. The entire Norse culture, the entire Scandinavian culture, was just so brutal. Like, they just, wow. Like, just wow. It was crazy. And, wow. But I've rambled on for long enough, so this concludes episode 1. I apologize for the terrible quality. I will get better eventually. All I can do is wait and see. But until then, peace out, and take care of yourselves.